Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Autechre magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Bana Haffar, an electronic music composer based in Asheville, North Carolina. Bana's new album, Intima, is out now on Touch, an album composed using the Tracker sequencer. And from what I've read and speaking to Bana, it seems that this sequencer, the way that it forces you to accommodate it, had a big influence on the movement and feel of Intima. It's an album as well that has a really interesting sequencing, as I talk about in our conversation. It starts with these details that feel very molecular, beats and pulses that are intricately placed, samples of, say, piano that are chopped up and sped up, glitching, and then as the album progresses, those details start to smooth out. We move into longer tones, softer details, and almost feels like you're kind of zooming out, and all these little molecules are starting to blur together into larger shapes, which feels appropriate given that we talk about microsound in this conversation too. It's a great record. It's so satisfying to follow the progression of it from start to finish. A headphone listen for sure, it's beautiful. So I'll put links to that in the show notes. What a treat to speak to Bana as well. Picked 3 records that I instantly felt very connected with. One of them in particular. And lovely to talk to her about them. So please do enjoy this conversation, and if you're enjoying this and other episodes of Crucial Listening, perhaps you can support the show on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/crucial listening, where you can donate one-off or monthly, any amount that you please, to help support the show. Okay, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy this one. This is Bana Haffar on Crucial Listening. Hello, Bana. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. So you are here to talk about your 3 important albums. Before we talk about those specifically, I'd like to talk about your new album, Intima, on Touch. So let's start with the background of the pieces that comprise this record. So these were composed for Touch's 40th anniversary celebrations in LA and Santa Cruz back in spring 2022. So to begin with, could you tell me about, don't know if this is anything specific, but the first things that kind of came together to generate this record? What were the first bits of Intima to fall into place for you?
So Intima was very much kind of focused on the sequencer that I had just bought. It's called a tracker, made by Polyand, and it's kind of a specific type of sequencing where it's like a vertical sequencing versus a horizontal sequencing. So I had been kind of playing with this new instrument, and around that same time I was asked to if I wanted to perform at Touch's 40th anniversary celebration. So I happened to be using the tracker, and I just kind of decided that I wanted to use that piece of gear primarily instead of the modular synthesizer, which I had been mostly using before then. And I wanted to kind of challenge myself and see if I could just make it all work just using the tracker, using samples that I had recorded from my modular over the years. And so it was really kind of centered around this tracker and like a personal challenge to use a new piece of gear and see what I could do with my existing samples to kind of make them even more complex, or just like sequence my own music almost. Chop it up, sample it, and sequence it in the tracker.
So you set that challenge for yourself. How challenging was it in practice?
I'm trying to remember remember the process, because it was a year ago, and I've done so many kind of different things since then. So, well, I'm sure any interfacing with technology is challenging and a pain in the ass in some way. There's definitely a lot of wrangling and manual reading and figuring out what the sound pool was going to be. And I actually wish I had reviewed my notes, because I took a lot of notes while I was working on the record, just kind of personal studio notes. And I actually wish I had reviewed those before speaking with you, because I'm sure there's a lot of information there and swearing and frustration. But yeah, I mean, just like anything, just kind of getting used to a new piece of equipment, figuring out all the button combinations, and it's like 80% struggles and then 20% breakthroughs that you forget the struggles.
Yeah,
because the breakthroughs are awesome.
You draw analogies as well in the text to the fact that it pulls from ongoing research into weaving and textiles. I've seen you mention before, actually, this analogizing to different practices outside of sound, which you don't see mentioned loads, actually, in interviews with artists, bringing in, other disciplines to talk specifically about their relationship with sound. So that's really nice. But what is it about weaving specifically that has been compelling to you as a means of engaging with sound and composing your music?
My kind of, diving into weaving started in 2020 when I was commissioned to do a project for a museum in Asheville. And that's kind of when I started getting into weaving and studying weaving. And it's been inspiring for me, I guess, in two kind of broad senses. Like, in one sense, it's inspiring to me in terms of the actual structure of cloth and the building of cloth. And then in a more kind of metaphorical sense, I'm super inspired by like the patience of weavers and the kind of the patience and focus that it takes to actually weave cloth. And I think a lot about how that can apply to an activity like sequencing, which is also very laborious, but I try and approach my sequencers like a loom, in terms of really taking my time to set things up. Because when you're weaving, and I'm not a weaver, I'm a fan of weaving and I'm a student of weaving, but I wouldn't consider myself to be a weaver. Maybe one day. But just like when I was taking weaving classes in person, I was just really struck by the patience it takes to set up a loom and to get, just the labor it takes to thread sometimes thousands of threads into specific bits of the loom, and, hours and hours, sometimes days before you even start weaving anything. And so I feel like there's just so many parallels to be drawn between the act of weaving and the act of sequencing sound. This idea of spending a lot of time on the back end, setting up your systems to then play them or weave them, or weaving, I guess the stakes are a lot higher, because if you make a mistake when you're setting up the loom, you're gonna see that for the entirety of your cloth. If one thread is in the 1 out of 1,000, or more than is in the wrong heddle, as it's called, you'll see that mistake for the duration of your cloth. So just kind of, that was very sobering, and so I just think about that a lot when I'm working with sequencers in terms of really kind of paying attention to the structure, on the back end.
It's funny because when I saw the weaving mentioned within the text, it got me thinking as well about the track sequencing. I think the sequencing of the track and the experience of the record from start to finish is really interesting, because you have a few tracks in the first half that have quite prominent beats, and then the prominence of those rhythms kind of dissipates into the folds of, some stuff that's more like drony and pulsing. And so I was thinking about the weaving as, when you start and you get quite explicit stitches, and then it dissolves into something that's more of a picture with more subtle textural effect within it. As it gets more complicated, those initial weaves get more and more kind of embedded in the general picture. But I wanted to ask about sequencing this record, really, because, like I say, it really struck me the way that the record develops, and those rhythms kind of get more buried into the folds of the record. So was there any particular thoughts driving how you decided to put these tracks into an order?
I actually listened to it again on Friday, the day that it came out. I don't know if that's very egotistical, but I was like, I want to hear it again now because I haven't listened to it, and I just want to have come back to it with fresh ears. And the sequencing also, I was like, oh wow, that's interesting that I chose to sequence the tracks in this way. Why did I do that? I think it's something energetic at the time. That must have made sense to me, and I think listening back to it last week, I think the way I interpreted it on Friday, or reinterpreted it, is it kind of starts off with the more kind of energetic, or maybe like frantic and hectic pieces, and then, like you said, it kind of settles and kind of blurs those structures into more the time variable becomes more malleable as the record goes on. That's kind of how I reinterpreted it.
That's cool. Yeah, you've got that extended piece in the middle, which almost acts like a chronic disruptor of how the record handles time, which is really cool. I love the record. One other question, actually, I did want to ask about, because it's really striking when it comes up, is the piano on Elemental, and I wanted to ask how you managed to get it to sound like that, because it's got this frantic, almost random quality to it, the way that the piano sample is kind of jittering around when it comes in. Is that you meticulously sequencing every little glitch of that? Are you playing that in real time? Yeah, how does that, I don't know the tracker, how did that play out?
So those are piano samples that I recorded actually in my parents' house in Beirut on my grandmother's piano, with probably, I don't even remember what mic I used, but I recorded those and then edited them into, short samples, put them in the tracker. And so the tracker, there's different types of tracker, but the specific one I was using, which is the polyend one, there are different kinds of built-in effects parameters that you can play with, that you can kind of repeat steps, and you can do rolls, which is my favorite thing about the tracker. I love the rolls in the tracker. I got the tracker originally because I love jungle and drum and bass. I was like, I'm gonna make jungle, and then I just completely was not able to do it. And I just that's why I call this is my tracker jazz record. I'm like, this is what jazz sounds like in a tracker if you're trying to make jungle.
That's great.
And you don't know what you're doing, and you just program a bunch of rolls. On piano samples. That's kind of what it sounds like, and you can re-trigger steps, but that's kind of the main thing that I love about trackers, the rolls, and I try and kind of use those, probably overuse them because it's my first time using a tracker. So there's a lot of rolls, and you can kind of program different types of rolls, ascending and there's 9 different kinds of ways to re-trigger a step. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the re-triggers, but that's kind of like the rolls are big obsession of mine, tracker rolls.
Oh, neat. That's great. I love the record. Congrats. Yes, it came out like 2 days ago when we're talking. So it's just now going out into the world. But when this comes out, it would have been out there for a while. People should definitely go listen to it. And I'll include links in the show notes to ensure they can do just that. So
thank you.
Bana, we should go to your important records. So one question I like to ask at this point is how you thought about the word important when picking your list of 3 records. So was there a particular way you understood important to come up with the 3 records that you did?
Yeah, when I first started thinking about it, I guess I got a little bit global, and I was like, what are like important records like for the world to hear? And I just started, and then when I sat down to kind of really think about them, I was like, I can only speak for the records that are important to me personally,
Right, yeah.
And so they are important, not in the sense of like these are records everybody should listen to, not at all. These are important in like a kind of a deeply personal way to me. And I recently saw, I went to a talk by this woman called Helen Molesworth, who is like an art curator, and she mentioned something about how she would pick paintings for the collection of the museums, and she mentioned like the idea of gold posts and the idea of like art that can withstand time travel. And so I was thinking of that in terms of like albums that can withstand time travel in my personal life, and kind of like sonic goalposts, records that are that kind of really influenced me, that I spent a lot of time with. So like important in the terms that these are albums that like deeply shaped me through a prolonged engagement with them over time, and became my kind of sonic goalposts. Even though, and we'll get into this later, but I don't necessarily listen to them anymore, but they're kind of deeply in my psyche, in my, important in terms of their kind of authenticity in that sense, in a very personal way.
Nice. Okay, great. Let's go for the first of these 3 records then, Bana. Which one would you like to go for first?
Okay, it was so hard to choose also, but we'll just... Also, in terms of the order, I was like, how are we going to talk about them? So I found like a random order, like a list randomizer online. And then so I just put them in there. But then I decided, I actually thought about this. So if you don't mind, I guess we can talk about the Jana Winderen one first.
Yeah, of course. Whatever order makes sense to you. Absolutely.
Yeah. I bypassed the list randomizer because it showed me what order I didn't want to talk about them, and so it did serve a purpose.
That's still useful. Yeah, that's great. Okay,
yeah, totally. Cool. I was like, no, that's a terrible order. I'm going to decide.
That's awesome. So Jana Winderen, the Wanderer.
Yes, drum roll. Okay, record number 1. And no, I mean, it's not in order of importance, just like in order of like flow.
Yes.
So, so Jana Winderen, The Wanderer, which is on Ash International, it came out in 2015. So, do you want me to start or?
Go for it. Yeah, I tend to ask at this point for you to give me a little introduction as to why this one's important to you. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is a record of hydrophone recordings that Jana Winderen took in the Atlantic Ocean of like phytoplankton and zooplankton, and she's just this like badass Norwegian scientist, field recordist, mathematician, and this is a really interesting record. This is important to me because it's the first time I actually consciously heard a hydrophone for an entire record.
Right.
Or just ever, really. I had never really heard what a hydrophone sounded like up close. So it really kind of blew my mind, and kind of opened up the world of field recording to me. Actually, this was kind of like my first time listening to an entire record of like field recordings, or deep sea recordings, like nature sounds. And I was like, well, you can do that. You can just you can make a record of just like phytoplankton sounds. It's amazing. Like I had no idea that you could actually do that.
Yeah.
It was pretty mind blowing at the time. I mean, it still is, and it's also important because I was reading in the in the notes about this album that half of the world's oxygen, I'm quoting here, half of the world's oxygen is produced by phytoplankton photosynthesis. So it's also important because it's important to like our ecosystem. So it's
that is
so important on that level too.
Yeah, that is bananas. That stat.
Yeah.
Can you recall how you first heard it? How did it come into your life?
I was trying to remember that, and I have no idea. Somebody must have told me about it, or I must have it was around 2017. I discovered it in Los Angeles, kind of right around the time that I was getting more involved in the electronic kind of music world, just kind of like the DIY scene through modular synthesizers. So I think somebody must have turned me on to it, or turned me on to touch. I don't know what order that happened in, but probably somebody in that scene, But I can't remember what was the connection point there actually.
So it's a wonderful piece. I'd not heard this before. It's really something. Obviously, it's great over headphones. You mentioned that it's the first hydrophone record that utilizes hydrophone for the whole thing, and that it's the kind of the first field recording album where it really became a gateway for you into that universe. So obviously the first is always a big occasion. Why do you think, though, it's had... I imagine you've heard other field recording records since, maybe other hydrophone records. What is it about this one that means that it's the one that's stayed with you and become the important one?
Well, just a correction, I don't know if this is the first hydrophone record. It's just the first time I heard an entire record of...
Oh, sorry, yes, that's what I meant. Beg your pardon, yeah.
I think it's because, it's hard to super quantify this, but I think because it really, kind of prompted me to start listening in a different way, and it expanded what I previously thought music or sound was or could be, and I just have a kind of a deep personal connection with the record because I spent so much time with it. And also there's it almost sound like I was listening to Curtis Rhodes, the computer musician at the time also, and I just felt like there's so much kind of overlap with the sounds that Curtis Rhodes was making with very complex computer or very precise editing of electronic sounds, and these tiny phytoplankton sounds, and the idea of that you didn't necessarily need a synthesizer to kind of generate these incredible just very kind of sonically satisfying clicks, and it kind of blurred the lines, because sometimes I would be listening to it and I would think that it was a synthesizer or there was some kind of a drone underneath, but it's just kind of sounds of the ocean, and it's kind of unclear if there are any other instruments or how it's processed. I don't really know what the process was that she used to make this record, but it just kind of totally captured my imagination, and it just kind of blossomed into this kind of collaborative friendship with touch, and it just holds a special place for this record.
That's really cool.
Or this piece, because it's one piece of music or sound. I don't know how we can even use that word anymore. If it's music, is it sound, is it...
Yeah, it's it reminds me, actually, the point you just made about the fact that computer music has a lot of kinship when it gets really complicated with these kind of sounds. There's a point on your record, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, apologies, Jana, where you use like a water sample, and it sounds like you repeat it or like treat it in such a way that you're like, that sounds like an arpeggiator or something. It's really striking, and that made me think, or made me consider whether you had a specific relationship with water. I know you did like this lovely mix with Mike Harding that you've been doing for Dub Lab, like a big series, one called Water Memory, which does actually start with Jana Winderen as well. Is there something specifically compelling about water to you as well as something that intersects with sound and an exploration of sound?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about that. I mean, I just kind of intuitively, obviously water's a big part of existence. That's so cheesy to say, but I mean, what is a connection with water? I guess I go through phases where I'm really like into water sounds and thinking about water and thinking about our connection to water, and it's I guess it's a very kind of accessible sound, or I don't know exactly. I don't have a conscious answer to that question, to be honest.
Absolutely fair.
It's just kind of a very satisfying sound out of the kind of range of available natural sounds. There's so many different, there's such a variety of water sounds, whether it's dripping or, I don't know. I think I'm just kind of spitballing right now. So.
It's great. Well, I think though you have highlighted something that I think really comes out on this record, which is, I feel like because The Wonder is pitched as this record which is recorded in the domain of zooplankton and phytoplankton in the Atlantic Ocean, kind of the implication that you're not just hearing these creatures, and I guess they don't exist in isolation. That's the whole thing, is that they have this huge interconnectedness, this really significant one, as per the ocean at large, with the rest of life on Earth and everything else. So there's something really nice about, the microsound element, but also the fact you're hearing so much other stuff on this album too, because you just can't pluck out a phytoplankton in isolation and record it, nor consider it just in isolation of everything else that it's kind of plugged into in an ecological sense. That's very lovely. I like that about this record.
Yeah, and you definitely hit on the right word, which I forgot to mention, but like microsound, this term of like kind of natural microsounds versus synthesized microsounds, and Do
you still listen to this one now?
I don't, which, I guess I just kind of, I just consume so much music that it, like, I just kind of have like a high turnover, but at that time I listened to it a lot, but I'm definitely going to revisit it. I mean, I revisited it last week before speaking with you, just to refresh my memory and see, give it the goosebump test and see if it still like holds. And it definitely, definitely does. And, I'm also a scuba diver, so I've kind of like experienced these sounds a little bit, and so it just reminded me of my of the one and only night dive that I did. It took me back to that, and just that feeling of being kind of suspended in this like black water, and just everything being completely still.
Wow. What's that like? So when you go on a night dive, can you see much? I guess that's the thing with a night dive, but what is that experience like? Like, what kind of sensations are you taking in on something like that?
Just trying not to freak out and just remembering to calm down. Like, you have two flashlights and you have a guide, and It's very it's frightening at first, but if you can get yourself to calm down and just really focus, instead of kind of looking out into the blackness, just focus on the wall or the whatever you happen to be diving. If it's a ship or like a wall dive, just kind of focus on the fish and all the like natural life that's happening. Then you can kind of calm yourself down, calm your breathing down enough to just be focused on that. And it's just amazing. It's amazing. Just this kind of sense of awe and wonder that I had during the night dive is like, it's the same feeling that I felt when I listened to this record again.
Let's go to your second important record now. Which one is next on your non-random list?
Drum roll. Okay. Autechre, Amber. Am I saying Autechre right? I know some people have different ways, but you're from the UK, so how do you say it?
Autechre, and
Autechre. Is that rude? I'm sorry. That's good.
I am close enough to London that's completely legitimate. Yes, I feel like that I read that as being the... I don't know. I bet they say there's not an official way. But that seems to have settled into... I ain't been called out on it yet. So, we'll go for Autechre, right? And Amber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do you say that if you don't have a British accent? Amber. So this was hard to choose because I love all of their records so much. So this was, I definitely knew that it had to be like an Autechre record, but I wasn't like sure which one. And then I was like, no, of course it has to be Amber because that's the one that I feel the most connected to. This one I discovered around 2014, and I was introduced to Autechre by Eric Cheslak, who goes under Rodent, in 2014 in Los Angeles. And it was kind of right around the same time I was getting into modular synthesizers. And, similar to the Jana Winderen one, this is also like a first, this is kind of one of the first kind of fully electronic albums that I listened to. After being a bass player for about 10 years and living in bass world, and non-electronic music or like not fully electronic music world. So this was a big one for me, and really kind of stretched my ideas of like what could be done with sound and sequencing specifically. I think I had just started playing with sequencers at that time. And so this was kind of like my kind of sequencing, like formative record. I really started thinking about electronic beats and all the discrete elements and layers that they had on this record. And I would just kind of, I studied it so much. And, I'd put on a track and follow just the hi-hat. Even if I can even call it a hi-hat. Right. Although, this record, they had, it's their second album. So this was, before the Max Insanity. So, maybe they did use an actual hi-hat. We can maybe say that. But, yeah, I studied this album, and this definitely a goalpost album.
Yeah, I'm so intrigued as to why this is the one that is the important one for you, because you said 2014, right? That's when you discovered it. So Autechre by that point were deep into Max stuff. I think XI had come out by that point. Maybe that was the most, or Move of 10. No, XI, I think I'm right. XI, I think, was the most recent thing, and obviously that's quite a bonkers record. Why do you think Amber's the one that sticks with you as the one that, you come back to and is the important one?
I was reading a little bit about it, actually, and I saw just kind of little background information. I didn't really know this. I knew it was their second album, but so quoting here from, I don't know, probably Wikipedia, but it says, unlike Incunabula, which was part of Warp's artificial intelligence series of albums and predominantly a compilation of older material, Amber was described by Autechre member Rob Brown as genuinely the first album we put out on Warp. And I thought that was interesting because it's like maybe I was picking up on that, where it really feels like the beginning of their it feels like a formative record of theirs.
Yes.
And I can kind of I could identify with that, especially because I was starting out with synthesis and sequencers, so I could wrap my brain around it a lot more than I could the Max records that they made. So I connected with it. Because it's accessible. I mean, it's a hip hop record,
right? Yeah,
it's totally a hip hop record. And I had, listened to a lot of hip hop. I played a lot of hip hop, peg bass, and so it was like a really accessible kind of gateway record into that, like as you said, bonkers world, which I later, fully embraced, but it was a little too, like their later records were just a little too abstract for me, and I had to kind of ease into it. So this was this was kind of like a gateway record, and you can hear that, like you can hear the. I don't want to say that it's a naive record, but you can hear the beginnings of their kind of sequencing ideas and using more stock sounds and more kind of sequencing cliches and also I was thinking about this also. I wonder how much the cover has to do with our very, very subconsciously how much album covers can play into our preference of a record. And I do love pink and purple and pastel pink and purple. Very surface level thing. I mean, there's something that just kind of captured I love that cover also because I love the desert. And yeah,
it's a lovely cover. You could definitely hear, as you say, like the synthesizer strings. I think were really striking to hear on an Autechre record. If you're really thick in their later stuff, do you have a favorite track or one that, as you're speaking to me now, kind of stands out? Can
I have two? There were two.
Absolutely.
It's hard to pick. I have two favorite tracks. So the first one is 9. It's not track 9, but it's the track called 9, and that sound, it's just like this elasticity of sound design, it's almost like a 303 sound. This kind of that melodic line in that track, I'm obsessed with it. And just the sound design in general, the kind of articulation of the kind of plucks that creep in and out, and the portamento and the delay amounts and the arpeggiation, and it's just kind of like a sound design masterpiece. And I listened back to it because I haven't heard it in a while, and I was just this is kind of a masterpiece of sound design to me. And then the second one, I don't even know how to pronounce this. Yulquin. Yeah. So also sound design and just that kind of dusty vibe and the envelopes of that sound. Just getting nerdy here with the technical. Envelopes not too technical, but also it's just a very kind of a simple, beautiful track. It's just kind of one melody with these kind of 3 layers. It feels more like a sketch. And so that track actually it reminded me of a quote from a book that I have called Architecture Without Architects that I wanted to mention. But the quote is, it's talking about town structures of Marrakesh. And the quote is, "There are no traffic arteries to speak of. The cool, narrow alleys of broken course often lead to dead ends." And that's what, I was like, that's what that track is. It's just kind of this kind of sketch of dead ends, and it's not really going anywhere. But it is a piece of sonic architecture nonetheless. And yeah.
That's so lovely. Have you seen them live?
Yes, I saw them once in 2015 in Los Angeles. It was amazing. They played in pitch black, and I was like, how can we not even see, like, the glare of their computer screens? Have you seen them live? Was it the same?
Yeah, it was I saw them in 2015 too, and then I saw them last year. And both times it was very dark, and I think felt louder because it was dark too, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Or just, just even more insane.
Yeah, did they do like a big hour-long piece or something when you saw them?
Probably. I mean, I doubt they would like stop for kind of applause in between their greatest hits.
Yeah, it's just like to offer out a thank you to the crowd. It's just a stream
of insanity. Yeah. I mean, I just remember it being like a stream of insanity in a black room for I obviously lost track of time and everything. It was.
Yeah, it's one of those experiences where when the lights come on and they stop at the end, there's a euphoric relief sort of wrapped up in the, well done kind of applause as well. It's all, everyone's just like, light as well. So it gets extra euphoric. So Amber was the important one for you. I'm intrigued what other records you had kind of in the mix before you were like, no, it's definitely Amber. Were there any others kind of jostling to begin with?
Cornfield.
Nice
Cornfield
choice.
Is like the first track, it's next level. And I do love the beats of Incunabula, definitely. And Trirepati. Is it Trirepati? I don't know. Yeah. Those three, but definitely Cornfield. I picked Cornfield first, and I was like, no, Amber, and they're all just different flavors of brilliant sound design, and I just feel like, in terms of electronic music innovation, they are just on the bleeding edge, to me at least. I don't think anybody comes close to their kind of level of mastery of this medium.
Bana, one more important record, the final one. Tell me what it is. Give me a little introduction as to why it's important to you.
Okay, this one is Boards of Canada, Tomorrow's Harvest, which seems very. Is that a cliche choice?
Well, okay, so Boards of Canada has come up once before on this podcast. Obey Al-Sharani picked it. Oh no, picked Music Has the Right to Children. I saw a poll the other day, because Boards of Canada's social media is constantly like eating itself, of like people's favourite records, and Tomorrow's Harvest was only picked by a handful of people. I think actually a lot of people are a bit within the diehard Boards of Canada sector, a bit sniffy about it. I don't think it's a cliche choice, but I'm really glad you picked it.
I wonder why. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I felt like maybe this is kind of a cliche choice. Everybody loves Boards of Canada. It's kind of obvious, but I love this record with my entire being. I love this record. And I definitely wore it out. I can't listen. I mean, not that I can't listen to it anymore, but I had to. I had this record in my car for 2 years. I had the CD in my car for 2 years, 2017, 2018. Basically the only CD in my car for 2 years, which is insane thinking back to it. And I had to ban myself from listening to it, and I broke the ban last week just for you to revisit it.
Honored. Wow.
I was like, you can't, like, okay, we're done now. Just like a dog with a bone in its mouth, like, leave it, you know? It's like, okay. And I was thinking in terms of, like, you know, you have like records that have like, you know, you have like tunes and rollers and bangers and I was like, this is a floater.
Oh yeah.
This is such a floater. I mean, it's just a wide album, sonically and conceptually, visually, imaginatively. It's just this like when I put it on last week, I just kind of, my eyes glazed over and I was in that BOC trance. You know, it's just like this like eternal trip that is Boards of Canada. Ooh. Yeah.
Do you remember how you first heard it?
I don't remember how I first heard it. I know that I discovered it in 2014. I can't remember how I arrived at it.
But it found its way into your car.
Yeah.
And I imagine my own experience with car records would attest to this, that's probably a big significant reason why it became the important record, because it ends up just fusing with your body, right, if you play it for 2 years straight. But yeah, why is this one the important one for you? Like I say, I think the most common choice that people go for, it's not mine, but Music Has the Right to Children is the one that people go for. Why is this the one out of all their records you think that juts out for you?
I think that the answer to that is kind of a deeply subconscious one that I'm not necessarily able to articulate why this one specifically, but energetically, this is the one that I kind of fused with, as you said, like I fused with it the most. And it kind of, this one really, like, this is an important record because it really held me. Like it kind of became my, like a perceptual kind of sonic security blanket for 2 years. And I was driving a lot between Los Angeles and Joshua Tree at the time, and so I just it takes me to the desert, it takes me to the freeways of Los Angeles, and it's just, and also the I mean, the cover is part of it, I think, you know. Something about the cover. I was actually reading about the cover, and it was shot in San Francisco. I thought it was Los Angeles, actually, but I mean, close enough, because anybody who's lived on the West Coast knows those colors.
Right,
they know those colors. I mean, that is such a vibe. It's such a vibe. This kind of like, you know, dusty grayish orange, dirty West Coast city sunset. Vibe. So it's kind of a combination of all of those things, and even like the track titles and the it's also a really generous record. It's 17 tracks. It's like a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot of music. It's just a really long just journey, and just very cinematic. I mean, I was like thinking it's like the sonic equivalent of like ketamine or something. It's you know what I mean? It's just yeah. It's a vibe.
It's a vibe, yeah, it is a vibe. Do you, as you say, it's a floater, everything floats into each other. I reviewed this record when it came out, so I got stream through that I couldn't download. But should I admit this? I ripped the stream basically, but I couldn't separate the tracks up, so I just had it as one long hour-long track in my car.
Amazing!
Yeah, so you couldn't. I had my favorite timestamps, but generally speaking, it just rolled in my car, which was, so I think we had quite a similar experience in that respect. But picking favorite tracks is therefore tricky, and I think the flow of the record kind of pushes against that as well. But do you have ones that stick out for you?
And I guess I had a similar experience to you because I was listening to it in my car. Like, I don't know what any of the tracks are.
Right.
It was just this 1 hour long, trance. So I had to go back and last week and listen to the individual tracks. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was like a separate track. I thought it was part of the one before. It's like, okay. I was like, I don't know the names of any of these tracks. I just kind of it was a, it's very, very similar. I might as well not have even had the track listing.
Yeah.
They weren't separated. It just flows so well. Again, I ended up picking two, but I'll pick the first one. Collapse is the one. Again, just kind of the vibe and the. It's hard again to articulate because so much of this is just a feeling. It's like, how does it make you feel?
Yeah.
So Collapse, just the feeling of that track. Something about the those kind of up and down arpeggios, kind of suspended over these two chords. And Come to Dust, also that one is just, that's an amazing track. And just the reverse snares on that are so good. That's just like the, that's such a great sound. And just kind of, the thing I love about Boards of Canada is they have the best LFOs, they've just nailed the LFO to pitch kind of modulation rate. That's kind of the benchmark of how to, that kind of perfect LFO rate and amount of warble. Nobody comes close. They just nailed it. They nailed it. Both of those tracks, just straight goosebumps. I love them. They're just the feeling of those tracks is, words fail.
So that is two very interesting picks. You may already know some of the trivia around this record, but the whole thing, according to the band, is like a palindrome. It's got a palindromic structure.
I didn't know that.
So Collapse is the center of the palindrome. It's a track that I believe structurally can run in both directions. I don't think necessarily the audio can be just flipped, but I think structurally it has a split. But also Come to Dust is the palindromic equivalent of Reach for the Dead. It's got the same chord sequence, so it's the sort of sister of that track, which as soon as I heard about this I was like, oh my gosh, where are the other sort of kinships either side of the record? And I wasn't able to find any as explicit as that, but there must be.
Oh my god, this is amazing. You're adding even more dimension to this record. Of course, the first thing I'm going to do when we get off Zoom now is I'm going to listen to Come to Dust in reverse. I'll just record it and play it backwards. Wow, I did not know this.
Oh yeah, Collapse is the palindromic one, and then Come to Dust is the
Collapses,
same.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes, that's the kind of center of it.
Amazing.
How cool is that?
Okay.
I was gonna say, I was gonna ask if you listen to this record now. You just confirmed it's sort of ran it into the ground as a car record. So instead, I'll ask: is there a car record currently?
I don't have a car anymore.
Ah, interesting.
Tears. Right. No, actually, it's kind of a liberation. I've driven enough. Living in LA for 15 years like you, that's like enough driving for multiple lifetimes.
Gotcha.
But I don't have a car, which is interesting because that's definitely changing the way I listen to music. Because, like, I tried listening to this record just like sitting in my computer chair. And yes, it's amazing, but it's such a driving record. Certain records are just car records, you know?
Yeah.
So now I'm like, you know, living the subway life and trying to figure out what that looks like or what that sounds like.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Because it's such a loud environment, right? Or if it's anything like the London Tube, it's just like any music gets flattened.
Actually, the Montreal subway is very, it's pretty quiet. Like, I was in New York 2 weeks ago, and it was, like, so loud and so rattly, and then I came back here, I was like, no, it's actually pretty smooth.
Oh. See, I just assume that's not even possible because our London Underground is just, like, so smoggy, so warm, so loud, like, it's really unpleasant. It's a bit like an Autechre concert, actually. The other question I wanted to ask then, that's interesting, just to segue out of what you're just saying, you don't have a car anymore, so car listening is no longer part of how you listen to music. So what are the predominant ways now that music comes into your daily life as a listener? Like, how do you listen to music?
So I consume an obscene amount of music. I would like, basically, like, as soon as I wake up till I go to bed, I'm constantly, constantly listening to music. Yeah, definitely. I mean, my friend Sean and I talk about this a lot, just in terms of, like, you know, using music for emotional regulation and also, you know, music is medicine. I think we all know that instinctively, and I think the more we can kind of start saying that and using those terms explicitly, the better off we'll be. But so I constantly listen to music in different ways. Like, when I wake up, I don't listen to electronic music till before noon, I would say. I don't really. So it, you know, it has to be either just kind of maybe like chanting or just acoustic or instrumental or some kind of drone or kind of traditional folk chill music. And I guess now I'm on like a bit of a musical schedule these days, or like a routine.
Oh, cool. Right.
I actually have like a full-on routine now, which is a little bit embarrassing because I used to listen to a lot of, like, you know, NTS and online radio and this all the time, but I've kind of stopped that for now. I'm just kind of going through a different phase, a different relationship with music, where it's very kind of it's very structured listening throughout the day and really thinking of the energetics of every piece of music that I'm consuming, and when that happens.
That's so cool. Could you tell me a bit more about that? When are you hitting the beats? Like, when does the hard stuff come in your day?
Well, okay, well, there's no, I mean, so, like, you know, I do kind of yoga in the morning, and I'll listen to maybe like Indian classical music or something like that, or chanting, and then have breakfast, and then when I'm doing my dishes, I put on like the OCs. That's kind of my current. I love the OCs. So that's kind of what gets me fired up. Do my dishes, brush my teeth, like get ready for the day, and then when I do computer work and admin work, you know, I'll listen to very kind of low key, kind of ambient music, like Richard Chartier or like Line, you know, that. That kind of stuff. And then in the afternoon. I'll listen to kind of chill music after I'm done with the workday. And then the beats, and then, I do have dance breakdowns where I'll just like blast some jungle, midday just to kind of come back to life. Like jungle is what I use to come back to life. If I'm fading, I'll just put on some jungle and I'll bring it back in, and like I'll get the blood flowing, and that's kind of my life force music. And then, at night, I'll listen to different kinds of dance music. I'm very much into Sam Binga right now. Also, do you know his music?
Say that name again?
Sam Binga?
No, I don't.
It's just really good. I guess like electro. I don't know. And then at night, I'm just really into this like Tibetan flute record. So that's what I'll play just to like bring it all in before bed.
That's so great. Oh, I love it. Bana, this has been so good. I've had heaps of fun listening to these records, talking to you about them, and also as well, Intimar as well is fabulous. So thank you for giving some insights into that. And yeah, thanks for expending your energy in the direction of this today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, and for the conversation. And it's fun. It's fun to listen, like to talk about music. Definitely. I mean, that's and it's just interesting to kind of share insights. And I look forward to listening to the other interviews on your podcast and see how everybody else answered these questions.
Right on. Nice. Thank you, Bana. And to everyone listening, see you next time. Goodbye.